So hello, I want to welcome you to this week's edition of Unfazed Under Fire. I'm David Craigots. I'm your host and moderator, and I'm privileged and honored to be joined today by a thought leader and a good friend, Dr. Rosie Ward. Rosie and I know each other from involvement in the Twin Cities chapter of Conscious Capitalism, as we both have served on the leadership board there. And over the time, we become good friends and we hang out together and have some amazing conversations. So I thought it would be great if we could bring that conversation onto the podcast and so everybody can benefit from it. But I thought I'd share a little bit about your background in addition to knowing you as a good friend and you being involved in the chapter at Conscious Capitalism, because you have a very esteemed career. You started your career in wellness and physical fitness. Ended up getting a master's in community health, and I know this is not all in a row, right? But it's kind of the general sense of it. Went on to get a PhD in organizational management, and as I mentioned, you're a thought leader in conscious capitalism. And not only in the leadership perspective, you also published a book through Conscious Capitalism Press, Re-humanizing the Workplace, which I love, and is a great gift to all of us. You're also an award-winning podcaster. For your show Up as a Leader. And you've got over 20 certifications that support your work, including working with Brene Brown, who I love, and gotten certified in her Dare to Lead program. You worked with Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy's work around immunity to change, Bob Anderson, the Leadership Circle, among many others, right? So you've done a ton. But wait, there's more. You've taken all this.
It's like the bad 90s infomercial, but wait, there's more.
Wait, there's more, And, you started your consulting and built a consulting org called Salveo Partners that aims to rehumanize the workplace so people can bring their best selves to work and home each day. So that's a really impressive resume. But I'd like you to maybe share a little bit about what I may have missed in there, which is what took you down this path, and what do you could say, obviously my heart, but there's something that you were following a scent of a trail. I could see the trail is kind of there, and it's kind of come to this big thing called Salveo Partners and your other great work that you do. But what took you down this path? If you had to share that, what about that?
That's a great question. And I think there's kind of two things that converged. One is my background, as you said, it started in kinesiology and public health. And I started in the world of worksite wellness or worksite health promotion, thinking that, the key to helping people thrive was to have healthier workplaces. And, we didn't know what we didn't know. We learn, we evolve and grow. But when I finished my master's degree and I was a practitioner and I was working in that field, I just sat here and I thought, this is BS. Like, I don't know what these people are publishing in these journals or how these people, but I was like, this crap doesn't work. And I thought, you've got to be kidding me that I've just invested how many years of my life in $80,000 in debt of 2 degrees for something that is stupid. Like, I just thought, oh my God, what have I done with my life? Like, that's literally this was just crap. And just to be truth be told, and at the same time, I was and I say leader lightly because I had a title, but I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I was put into this leadership role and no one to develop me. I had no idea what I was doing. I learned, God love Kristen Hadid, wish she was around. She's younger than me, wish she was around back when I was, because I learned everything from screwing up. It was and I realized I probably got the wrong master's, because my favorite class in my master's program was management and leadership and healthcare. And probably because I was a new leader and didn't know what I was doing. I hated epidemiology. I really didn't like a lot of the other classes. And so I'm sitting here and I finished my degree and I thought, well, I have this disheartening realization this stuff doesn't work. And I thought, well, now what am I going to do with myself? And there were a lot of jobs back then in public health. That was after 9/11, and there were a lot of grants and a lot of work happening. I thought, well, maybe to impact change and really have people be whole and thriving, I need to impact change at the policy and community level. So I thought, well, I did just get a public health degree. Maybe I should go work in public health. And that for me was the other kind of intersection, because that was the first time in my life, besides reading about it, that I personally experienced a toxic work environment. And I experienced firsthand what it did to me. I gained weight. I got sick. I became like, you know me, I'm a like quadruple A overachiever. I went to like apathy, watching the clock. Like it was like, it sucked me out of me. And
Right.
my friends were like, Rosie, what's wrong with you? You don't seem like you. And it was like this aha moment. And I thought, no wonder why what we're doing in the name of wellness and workplace health is not working, because you can take someone with 2 degrees and multiple certifications at that time and plop her in a workplace that's toxic, and look what it does. And I thought, okay, I didn't just waste money. I'm going to take on the industry. And basically this industry is broken and off course, and I care enough about it. And I made a lot of friends in this industry to see how can we make it better, because I felt like it was a sinking ship. And so that first toxic work environment was kind of I got to figure something out. I knew what didn't work, but I didn't know what did. And I was very fortunate to land at a natural healthcare university while I started my PhD in organization and management. So I'm like, I'm going to shift gears, but they let me play. And I was like, look, I don't know what works, but I know what doesn't. And they were very forward thinking. I had an incredibly supportive leader, and they let me play. And I was able to negotiate my first coaching training while I was there. I was able to negotiate working into part of my job so that I could get experience while I was learning this stuff through my degree program. And then that led to me going to a consulting firm, and that consulting firm was great for a while. They let me play. And then they joined they were a regional firm. They joined a national firm, and it all went to hell. And that was my second experience of a toxic work environment. And at that time, now I was a mother, and I saw the ripple effect it had on my son and my family. And I just thought, life is too freaking short. No one should have to put up with this crap. While it's funny, like, right? It's funny for like Horrible Bosses, part 1 and part 2 movies, or shows like The Office.
Right.
They exist because this is normal and it's accepted. And I'm like, this isn't okay. And so that was kind of my second. I'm like, that's it. Like, I have all this weird knowledge and all this weird combination of training and skills at the time. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way. And that was just kind of those were the convergence of kind of those two things that had me get to where I'm so passionate about having more human workplaces.
Well, it sounds almost like you could be one of your clients talking to you in your first session, what you just shared. It's like we all, it's kind of like we know something's not working, but we don't know how to change it, right? And what you decided to do with it is, proverbial take lemons and turn it into lemonade and make it something sweet that can be actually applied and useful. And I think that's what most visionaries run into. They run into, this is not working. There has to be a way for it to work. And when you start asking that question, you open up a whole new range of possibilities, which led you to get, supported in getting your coaching certification and working in a situation where you could actually start affecting change and seeing what's worked. So it's kind of like it's like we down, I think probably, this is something you learned from Brene Brown too, is like we almost downplay and don't look at our suffering. We pretend like it's not there. And it's the greatest teacher we have if we look in the right way, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think for myself, as much as it sucks, I have learned more and grown more and become a better version of me through every challenge, BS, hardship that I encounter. It's what pushes us, and it grows us, and it comes. There's a lot of collateral damage and side effects and stuff that go with it. But if I look back, it's like, I always think about Viktor Frankl, when we can't change our circumstances, we're forced to change ourselves. And when we are pushed through and into things that are hard, it reveals a lot about what we're capable of, but it also helps us, if we choose to, and if we want to, tap into a different version of ourselves. And I think that's what you and I do a lot with our coaching clients. It's like, I am not here to be your cheerleader. I am here to help you grow and find that edge. If you want someone that's just gonna be like rah and tell you what you want to hear, that's not me. And I've appreciated the people who have given me those opportunities to stretch, who've let me fall down, but have also been there to support me, to help me get back up. Like that's how we grow.
Yeah, and I'm going to put you maybe a little on the spot. You can plead the fifth on this a little bit if you want, but you've had many influencers that have shaped the work that you do, the person you are, lifted you up at the right times. But what you say of your experiences or those influencers have really been most influential to galvanizing your inspiration and purpose behind your work? Would you, if is that a fair question?
Well, there's a lot, but I think I have to say two. And because I actually wrote a blog about this, that I wrote a blog. It was something about like what peanut butter cups can teach us about leadership. And here's why. I think both of these people and both of these bodies of work by themselves are amazing and transformative. And I think they're a little incomplete without each other, and you put them together and it's like magic.
Right,
So
exactly.
with that as my background, I would say that what I call like the chocolate is Brene Brown and her Dare to Lead work and culmination of a lot of her work. And what I love is that whether you like her or not, she normalizes the messiness of being human. She helps us recognize that this is a normal, common human experience and gives us language to help us understand, oh, I'm not crazy. Oh, I'm not alone. And there is such power in that. And having, spent 3 days with her and trained with her, and I met her once before, but she really is the real deal. She's like normal. And she's like, I'm struggling like you. And she's not pretending not to be. And even as her star rises. And so that work for me personally, like I still remember the gifts of imperfection, because perfectionism was one of my go-to armor, and I still struggle. I'm way better, but I feel like I'm an ongoing, like recovering perfectionist. And to just be able to say like, oh my gosh, this is normal. And that not enough voice, and oh, how you quiet that not enough voice is gratitude. And just like, oh, no wonder why this was so hard. And so that work, being able to provide that to teams and events and groups and individuals, and for what it's done for myself, has been amazing. And when I go to like, so that's like the chocolate or the peanut butter, the stickiness is Bob Keegan and Lisa Leahy. And I think they're, I got introduced, it is. And I got introduced to their immunity to change work at one of the employers I was at. When I left the consulting firm, I had a 2-year non-compete. And so I went to this small health system, and a week in, they were like, hey, all the leaders are going to be going through this coaching program. And I'm like, okay, like I'm always up for development. And I had done probably 5 different coaching certifications at that point. I had been in years of therapy, right? I had done a lot of freaking work on myself. And you do this immunity to change map. You have a change goal and you look at where you get in your way. And I looked at it and I was like, and I remember I looked at my coach, her name was Barbara, love her. And I just said, why the hell is this still here? Like how, and I'm like, why does this still exist? I have done so much. And she's like, because you haven't cut the wiring yet. Going through the process and actually like disintegrating this filter, these assumptions that therapy didn't get rid of. I thought they did. Like I got better, but I was still stuck. And it was oh my God. And then she was like, well, at some point they might offer another coach training. And so I was stalking like their website. And then they opened up, because they didn't for years, they opened up a mapping workshop, and then they had applications for their coaching. And so spending a year training with those, and you had to go through the process again. And I just think so here's where I'm going with this. If you're not familiar with immunity to change, I don't know, maybe we can put the blog in the show notes or something.
Sure, absolutely.
But Brene Brown talks about stepping into the arena and leading into vulnerability and, all of the different skill sets of courage, which are powerful. And if I have an underlying unconscious competing assumption that I'm not aware of, that tells me it's not safe to do that, I'm never going to lean into those skill sets of courage. It's too unsafe. It's too scary. It's too threatening. And so what an immunity to change helps us uncover that and rewire that. So now if I get past that filter and change that meaning making system, maybe now I can step into the arena and vice versa. So those two combined for me have been game changers, and I use them both by themselves. And I feel like either one is a little incomplete without the other.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, we talk about, conscious leadership and the importance for a conscious leader. And, this is where I think we have alignment for sure, is it's an inside out development, which means you have to understand what's meaningful to you, what you care about, at least understanding what's purposeful to you, what's your leadership brand, or what do you desire to, how do you have impact as a leader? What do you value most? What do you care most about? And you can get very clear on those things, as you point to in your, why am I still dealing with this thing? And there is, I think 33% of kids today have some kind of experience of having seeing violence in their communities. 70% of adults have had at least one intense traumatic experience in their life. And we know what happens when that occurs from the trauma-informed work is that it's not like we can talk ourselves out of that, and that's where talk therapy can kind of fall down because it can actually reinforce, not necessarily heal. But it's really what it is a stuck fight and flight response that's just gotten stuck, and that just gets triggered again every time anything like it happens. So in the immunity to change work, I'm curious, however you can describe it. So how do you go in, and what are the principles of going in to dissolve those stuck places that you may have spoken about 1,000 times and thought you looked at every angle of it, but it's still in your filtering mechanism? What are some things you do about that?
So there's a very methodical process after you do an immunity to change map, which is where it's just like it sounds, it's a map for your journey. The map is only the starting point. It's like you've identified, it's
right.
Oh, now I look at the map it's like getting a diagnosis. Like now I know what I'm dealing with, but now what the heck do I do? And so there's a series of methodical exercises that starts with helping you realize that this is a narrative that was formed in the formative years of your life on a brain that isn't fully developed, that made, kind of interpreted a situation a certain way. And now you've been holding on to that. And whether you had a happy childhood or traumatic childhood or anything in between, this stuff shapes you. So let me give you an example. So like I grew up as the youngest of 5 girls. I was in an overachieving family. I joked that my parents were tired by the time they got to me, like they were done being parents because there was such like a big gap between myself and the oldest. That's my joke, my story. But here's the thing is it was things like, well, I only got praised when I overachieved or got an A. I got yelled at when I messed up. It was, why can't you be more like your sisters? Looking back, money was tight and it would be easier, but I'm looking at it, you don't love me, you don't accept me for me.
Exactly.
So I created this
Kids
narrative.
are making their decisions. They're making their own decisions without instructing them, telling the parents what's going on.
Right. So you can look back as an adult and go, oh my God, we like had no money. And they're probably like, we can't afford to pay for dance lessons, but that's not what comes across. It's like pushing you to be like your sister. So I created a narrative of unless I'm perfect, unless I overachieve, unless I be something other than I am, I'm not lovable. I'm not valuable. Right. And what I didn't realize though, is that was a narrative I created. So guess what you see on the outside? Work hard, be captain of the dance line, get A's, be the best at this, be the best at that, achieve, because it was this accolade. And what I realized is I was trying to fill this hole that I didn't have. And there's so many people, like I coach wildly successful leaders and physicians and people. And there's this like, you know what, I didn't make the team, or you know what, my parents didn't believe me when I said what or you know what, something bad happened and I created a narrative as a kid that if I was in better control or more responsible, I could have prevented that. And now I have this hyper need for control, and I have the responsibility of the world on my shoulders as an adult, that somehow it's my responsibility to make sure bad things don't, like, it's crazy the crap we do to ourselves on this underdeveloped brain. And that, what we don't realize is when you talk about something gets triggered, our 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 50-year-old self is not responding today. It's that 10-year-old scared little kid.
Which is
and so these exercises help you understand how that filter or how that meaning-making system got created. And again, I will tell you, this is like where work only gets you so far. I remember watching my other fellow leaders coming out of the coach's office after they went through their biography of what, and they're bawling. And I'm like, I wrote the thing up in 5 minutes. I'm like, yeah, I know. I walked in and I go, why the hell is this still here? Like, I've done this exercise a gajillion times. I know exactly how this narrative got formed. Tell me why it's still here. Like, I was pissed, right? So, but here's the thing is understanding where it came from helps you if you didn't know that, but then it's the next step. So then what you do is you start to basically look at, how can I put myself in situations safely that have a high probability that I can poke holes in this narrative. So as an example, like for me with this perfectionist, oh my gosh, well, can I be less than perfect and still have my friends love me, or still have my husband
Right.
love me, or, and right. Or like, can I, not overachieve this and have it be okay? Like you start putting yourself in situations that are the opposite
Yeah.
of what that filter tells you. And when the worst that you imagine doesn't happen, when you're not rejected or laughed at or whatever, what it does, it's like Swiss cheese. It starts to poke holes,
That's right.
and your
Right.
and your brain that has this vice grip on this story starts to like let it go. It's like a paradigm shift, and you
Right.
start to see, oh, that filter still is there. That filter's never going to go away, but now it's like off to the side, and I don't have to look through it anymore. I have all
Right.
this other opportunities that I can look through, and so it just expands your world. But it's not easy. It's not a quick fix. And so if people are so threatened or so scared, or cannot, no matter what you do as a coach to create a safe space, if they're not willing to, we call it the messy middle, go through that
They have to
messy
confront
middle.
it. Yeah. Well, and trauma
happen.
trauma-informed therapy, we talk about up at work, we talk about you have to create a resourcefulness of safety within yourself to be with the worst part of your trauma. So the interesting thing is that I think one of the things that we don't get about self-awareness, because it's spoken about a lot, but it's kind of like we're fish in water. We don't recognize the healing properties of it. But it doesn't have a judgment. It doesn't come with the same judgment. But we have to be courageous enough, and brave enough to learn how to be safe enough and understand there's a place within us of safety that can stand with that. And as we stand with it, it's simply what's so amazing about it. It's a release in the nervous system. And then what happens is the Swiss cheese thing starts happening, and you start creating space between you and it, and it becomes less prevalent in your attention, right? And you start then having energy to put your attention on things you care about or energized by, et cetera. Is that fair to say?
It's totally fair to say. And the way that what Bob Keegan refers to is we move from being subject to it being an object, right?
Yes.
Like we can look at it more objectively. And one of the things that I learned in one of my trainings, I don't know which one, probably multiple, because a lot of them, have overlap, but that it'll be like when that voice comes up, or that need to self-protect, that need to armor up, that need to whatever is showing up, it is like in that moment you can go, thank you for trying to keep me safe, right? Like honoring it. Like, I understand right now you're trying to keep me safe, and I'm not 10 years old anymore. Or, you know what? I know you're trying to keep me safe, and this is good for me. So it's like, the more we fight something, the more it like digs in harder, versus acknowledging it, creating space for it. And then it puts us back in that moment of choice where I can choose not to listen to you. Just because you're a thought in my head doesn't mean you're true, and doesn't mean I have to pay attention to you, and doesn't mean I have to let you in the driver's seat.
Right. Yeah. And the more and more I've worked with leaders over the, past 20 plus years, and you've worked with them many years, I more and more I'm seeing that, most of my clients are far more brilliant than I am. That's what I say all the time. I mean, I learn a lot from them. I learn a ton from my clients. One of the things, though, that I see happen over and over again is the thing that most stands in the way of their brilliance is the things we're talking about now.
100%.
That over the years, as you have the white paper on, redesigning leadership development. I can't remember the name right off the top of my head. I'll get, what is the name of that white paper you have?
Oh, it's Ushering Leadership Development into the 21st century.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry, I didn't remember the name off the top of my head, but we talked about the need to redesign it. And one of the things I'm seeing more and more is we try to teach leaders how to lead others before they learn to lead themselves. Yep. And that I'm seeing more and more my work actually being directed in that direction. And what I find is when the ignition switch goes off, if you say from Bob Anderson's model, if there is a rise into the creative state of consciousness that leads to leadership, natural leadership expression, that the brilliance is there to lead. It isn't there isn't like the capacity to lead isn't not there. It's like it's been blocked by these things, rather than I have to teach you now how to lead. Now we give them road signs, and we give them distinctions, and we give them ways of looking out at their organization, which is also priceless, and you do a lot of that. But at the same time, the ability to do that is innate in a lot of the people that we work with.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're spot on. And we'll work with people who have been leading other people, leading entire organizations, perhaps for decades, but there's still something where they get in the way or they're stuck. And I think that's where, competencies and stuff doesn't matter. And since you brought up, Bob Anderson, and Bill Adams, one of the things I love about their work and their model that we leverage, because I think it helps people understand it, is they talk about the two games of leadership, the inner game and the outer game. And that we need both, like to be an extraordinary leader, we need both. And I also like that Bill Adams says the process to become an extraordinary leader is the same process to become an extraordinary human being, which is why we say like leadership isn't a title or role. But here's the thing is the inner game is that messy stuff. It's the meaning making system and the self-awareness and all the stuff that is tough, is hard, is vulnerable, is cringy. And we tend to skip past it because of that. The outer game is the stuff like how do you have performance conversations and your competencies and your behaviors and your feedback skills. And that matters too.
Absolutely.
But one of the things that I love that Bob says is he's like the inner game runs the outer game. And so what we need is we do have to work on that inner game first, because they call it like an operating system. If we don't upgrade it, like you said, to move into that creative zone, we're running out of flawed self-protective operating system. And then you know what, that communication skill or that class or that training doesn't stick because the operating system can't support it. So like I had a technological crap show yesterday with my phone. My operating system was all messed up. I'm not kidding. In 3.5 hours. And I was like, oh my God, right? Like if the operating system
isn't working,
working, none of the other, like I lost half of my apps. I couldn't get into my email. Like it derailed me. And I was like, but this is such a good metaphor, even though we're not machines, when the operating system has us stuck in our 10-year-old self and we don't know it, when the operating system is hardwired to self-protect, when the operating system is hardwired to cling tightly to what's familiar, then I don't care how many change initiatives and, Six Sigma programs you try to put in and whatever, and we wonder why it doesn't work because we haven't accounted for the human aspect that the change desires. We think people are just going to follow a process or a communication. It doesn't work that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, in thinking about the people that you walk in to, and maybe we've touched upon it, what do you think, if maybe you don't think people get it wrong, but what do you think most executives get wrong about the changes they need to make to create a more innovative, high-functioning organization? So this is moving in a little bit of different direction, but is there something that, there's an understanding that maybe somebody that hasn't been through a development process before thinks has to happen for them to be more effective or for their organizations to be more effective? Where do you think, is it they miss the inner game? Is that the place they miss it?
Yeah.
Or what would you say?
Oh, 100%. And I can tell you, we have some clients right now that there's challenges because there are some very high level leaders who don't think that they don't think that vulnerability matters. They don't think that they need to look at themselves. They don't think this inner game stuff. They want to jump to outer game. They are in such go mode, and they're in such a rapid growth or a rapid change mode. And they don't realize that that's actually to their detriment. And I think or it's the mindset of, well, it's other people, but I'm good. I don't
get
need
that
to
a lot
look at
too.
it.
Yeah.
Right. Or it's
coach them, leave me alone.
Yep. And I tell you, like last year, there was an organization that was referred to us and started talking to them and realized the person who was trying to bring us in very much understood there was some dynamics going on that needed inner game work, but also said that he doesn't think like that the CEO and this other person were going to do it. And I'm like, well, then I can't help you. Because you're gonna waste money on consultant if they're not willing to get feedback, if they're not willing to do this work, like good luck. And he's like, they won't do it. I go, well, then I'm not going to take your money. It's not going to help you. And guess what? They went and paid another consultant. And guess what? I heard through the rumor mill, they're still the same old struggling, and they just flushed a lot of money down the toilet. Like I can't do it.
Well, this is also an area that we have to challenge our profession around, and how it happens to. It's not just happened to our profession. It's happened if you look at legal, you look at other places, it's happened. But what happens is, the companies pay large sums of money for leadership development. They can, and they do it because it's usually a CEO's top 3 priorities to grow leadership in their organization. That's been consistent across all surveys, present and future. And yet we come in sometimes, or I won't say us, but I think sometimes coaches and consultants come in and they are almost bow to the whims or the desires of the executives to the extreme of not doing what they need to do to make the actual changes happen. And that's where I have a concern for our profession over time, that we've done that. And then you've got a mixed bag of people that have had different experiences with consultants and so forth. So that's a growth area for us.
Well, and I think in all fairness, right, people have different skill sets and different training, and they may not. True. So if someone's expertise is in that outer game stuff, there's a place for it.
Absolutely.
But it's misplaced if the inner game isn't there to support it, right? So not every consultant or firm or whatever or coach is going to be necessarily skilled at both. I mean, it's great if they are, but here's the thing, there's a place for it all. But yeah, if I'm mainly outer game stuff, I need to know that so that I can position I can help you, but these are the contingencies or the prerequisites for this to be effective. And I always say, I don't care if you're a formal leader, if you're a consultant, if you're a coach, like one of the most powerful things you can do is ask questions that helps expand thinking and help shift thinking to go, well, I didn't really think about that before. And like, look, I want to set you up for success. Or like that client we ended up not taking, like, I want you to be successful. And I'm telling you right now, you're setting yourself up and us up for failure. And I would love to help you, but I can't do that if there's an unwillingness here. And I'm not going to back down on that. And it's like, because I lose integrity with that. And
Absolutely.
so if I'm an outer game skilled person, that's fine. I need to know that though, and then partner with some people who know how to do the inner game stuff or shore that up for myself, but be able to have a conversation of, hey, I can help you here. I can help you with strategic planning and I can help you with all these things and I can shore up these skills. And what's the foundation I'm layering this on? And let me ask you a good question and make sure you have a good partner or skills internally to shore this up or upgrade that operating system so that the work I do with you can stick and hold and be effective and you're not wasting your money or time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you said, Bob Anderson, the inner game drives the outer game. So if the inner game is well developed, then the outer game can be really toned and developed well. But if that isn't, then you're going to have obstacles in the way of the outer game working well. That's just what it comes down to. And that's the truth. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So in your work in the world of organizations, what do you think most has to happen for workplaces to be rehumanized, as you put it? If you were to say, like, what do executives and organizations have to put their attention on most to rehumanize their organizations?
That's a great question. And there's a few different things. I give it depends, but I think first and foremost, we need to recognize, like, we just need to take a step back for a second and recognize the world that we're all living and working in, because it's hard. It's challenging. You brought up trauma. I mean, there has been one traumatic event after another, like a series of crises for the last 3 years, which is why you're seeing this increased emphasis on employee well-being and mental health. And we have a mental health crisis in our kids. Like, we can't pretend this doesn't exist. And so people are like, I don't want to deal with the fluffy stuff or the human stuff or whatever you call it. Well, good luck, right? And so I think we have to like just kind of hit a pause button and say the rules of the road, so to speak, are fundamentally different. Because like you said, when we are dealing with a constant like trauma-inducing or triggering environment, which we are, here's the thing, is that as a human being, our protective mechanisms that are innate in our wiring kick in and we don't even realize it. And so what I see happening is that our world is not going to get any simpler or less chaotic or less VUCA, right? I know you have like volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. But yeah, like it's not going to get any less VUCA. It's only getting more VUCA. And as the VUCA-ness increases, because of all of that, it kicks in our self-protective instincts even stronger. And so what I see happening is that the gap between what the world is demanding of us, or the VUCA-ness, if you will, and our innate human DNA is getting bigger. And and this is why, if you look at, like, there was research that was done saying that Americans today can only absorb half as much change as they could in 2019. And, our mental health and our burnout and all this stuff, it's because this is happening. And if, as organizations, if we're going to have a more human workplace, one, we have to name and normalize that this is happening and stop pretending it isn't.
Thank you
first
for
and
saying
foremost,
that.
right?
Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
So
it's true.
Toxic positivity doesn't help anybody. So one, we have to name it, right? It doesn't. So we have to name it and normalize it and be like, this is what we're dealing with. And so given that this is what we're dealing with, what do our people need to feel seen, to feel heard, to feel valued as a human being? And, you hear about layoffs and stuff left and right. The tendency in this environment is to push even harder on people and to do more than less. And that's the opposite of what they need. And so I think to rehumanize the workplace, when you think about having an environment of inclusivity and belonging, and where, we have meaningful work and all of those things, we have to have an environment of psychological safety where we can name that stuff is hard, where we can have leaders who know how to model vulnerability in a productive way that can create a safe space for people to say, I'm struggling, and I think that that is at the core of everything else. It's awesome. Yes, you need to have a higher purpose. Yes, people are looking for that. And guess what? You could have the most awesome purpose as an organization and the awesome values and be living them to an extent. But if I don't feel safe to say I'm having a hard day, or I don't feel like I can speak up and share an idea because I might be rejected, or I don't feel like I can show up to work and be me, I have to dull my sparkle to be accepted, and I have to wear a mask, that's exhausting and tiring. And so I think we have to start to look at, how do we create a space for everybody? Doesn't mean anarchy and we don't have,
right, of course,
and rules.
Well,
yeah.
Well, I mean, I think, and this is something to touch on, because I think that, number one, I have a belief that, if you look at Edelman's trust index, the trust for government and institutions has plummeted. The belief that they're going to do anything about it. The trust in the media has plummeted for various reasons, but trust in business leadership is still strong. And I wonder if, or it's strengthened through this. And I believe that, conscious business leaders can be the ones that actually, and this goes back to stretching beyond our boundaries of our mission as creating value for our customers, and stretching beyond what can we contribute to the greater good around us. And one of the things I think, where business leaders can start is what you've spoken about. We have a significant rise in divisiveness, which is one of the most concerning things for me, that people are getting to the point of hating the other side or believing the other side is to blame. And as you know, as fear goes up, as the survival mechanism kicks in, what are you going to do? You're going to look for your peeps, where you feel safe, where you feel heard, where you feel you can be okay with yourself. And that may mean glomming onto a set of beliefs that put you in a category that now you're going to fight with other people, right? So that's a natural thing to occur, and you're pointing to what I love you're saying about one of the key things for leaders today is to create this space of psychological safety. Now, I noticed this kind of early on in the pandemic, and before, but wait, there's more, but wait, there's more, but wait, there's more started happening. It just keeps piling on day by day. That people would almost feel that their work was their bubble of safety. They would go to work and they could forget about all that, and they could and we saw a burst in engagement during the first part of the pandemic that actually we've lost a lot of since, for obvious reasons. But it's because people found that safety at work. But now you're saying also, and I do believe this is true, that organizational leaders somehow to have to be more explicit about you're safe here, and that we honor each person's opinion within reason, as long as we're being respectful and honoring, and that maybe we can talk about things and dialogue rather than debate about it. And I'm wondering, is that too much to ask of business leaders, or do you think that's the right direction, or what caveats would you have to that?
I think it's necessary, but the caveat is this is where I say purpose and values do matter, that as an organization, the foundational work has to be there.
Yes.
where we're crystal clear about our purpose and why we exist, but that can't be by itself. Simon Sinek talks about, the why, how, what, like the why and how go together, meaning that it's not enough to have values if you have not operationalized those values, meaning you have not translated them into very specific behaviors. Like this is how we show up. Like, so if I'm a brand new employee, I kind of know the rules of the road, so to speak. I know when I'm in alignment and I know when I'm out of alignment. And this is not about like, Stepford Wives or something. It's about, right. It's like we have laws in society for a reason, or there would be chaos and anarchy. And so it could be things like if someone has a value of respect, I'm sorry, but that could mean something different to other people. But if you say, in this organization, we seek first to understand. In this organization, we assume positive intent. In this organization, we actively practice listening to understand rather than listening to reply. In this organization, we check out our assumptions. We talk to people, not about them. Like that's very clear. Like this is how we behave. And so I think you have to have that stuff, right? In order to be able to say, okay. And then there's a level of, we have to hold ourselves and each other accountable, but it's okay. So yeah, we can talk about the tough stuff. We can give challenging feedback. We can receive challenging feedback. And I have to be able to go, okay, I need to do this with curiosity, or I need to say, hey, David, you know what? I'm noticing I'm really shutting down right now and I can't hear you anymore. Can we have this conversation tomorrow?
Yeah, it's like having more conversational intelligence as well, and learning what that is and why it's hard to have. That goes back to immunity change and all that. There's other things that you've spoken about, and in order for this to happen, we need brave, courageous leaders, right? Because they already have a lot on their plate. In fact, I say to my leaders all the time, what you're dealing with now, you've never been trained nor has your experience informed you to deal with. You're in a highly, as you pointed out, adaptive versus technical challenge. You're in an adaptive challenge. As a species right now, many would say that we are at a World War II, Civil War, Revolutionary War period in our history, that we are in an hopefully adaptive to thrive, not just survive, but to thrive as a species. And we're being called to account in a certain way by life to say, what are you going to do? And as species, we know that we are naturally loving, caring, and collaborative at our core. If you look at our, brethren in our, in the animal kingdom, the bonobo apes or chimpanzees, they demonstrate that in their society, right? We have that same quality in us that's natural. But right now it's going to take we have to kind of jump over a chasm of this divisiveness to get there. And it's going to take bravery and courage from leaders. So when you're talking, and now I'm going to take this on in addition to everything else I've been trying to learn, right? So what do you say to leaders that are challenged by that say, hey, that's a lot for me to bite off. I'm afraid if I open my mouth, the whole place is going to collapse. Now, you pointed to some of it already. They said we have to get some things in place that are a little easier to construct than jumping into that fire, right? But anything else you would say about what has to happen for a leader to become more brave and courageous in their leadership in this way?
Yeah, I think so. Certainly having those guideposts becomes important. I also think that looking at a couple things. One, there's safety in numbers, meaning that if we can create a core and common language. So that's why we do a lot of work. I will work with individual leaders, but a lot of times there's a parallel process where we're working with a team, because when we can give a team core language and tools, right, then someone's not going in alone. And, you probably know there's been a long standing saying in coaching that you can't take a changed person and put them in an unchanged environment and expect that anything's going to be different. So a lot of times it's looking at, okay, it's not just how do we need to equip leaders, right, to be able to lean into curiosity and to use Brené's language, step into that arena and not tap out when things get cringy. And at the same time, I mean, that's really what we're talking about when we talk about courage. But we also, though, have to talk about then how do you create these wraparound human-centric systems that make it normal and innate and reinforce it. So everything from like how do you hire and onboard people? How do you conduct your meetings? How do you handle when someone wants to take time off? How do you, like, all of these systems that we don't think about, like any one program, any one developmental
Right.
event, any one policy by itself, it goes back to it's incomplete. So we need to think
Right.
about how do all these things reinforce and wrap around. So as a
And
leader, it's like, okay, here's the thing. We are in a spot where we can't afford not to do it. But I think we also have to be clear that, like, if I'm like, in my own organization, that me saying like, okay, like this is challenging, or you know what, we lost money on this conference or whatever, like we've got debt we've got to pay off, but I'm confident we can do it. And here's the plan. That's me being transparent and vulnerable, but not causing unnecessary worry, swirl, and harm. But here's the thing is what you'll get some leaders will be like, oh my God, I'm so worried. Oh, I'm right with you. And they don't know how to manage
Right.
their own emotions. And they like escalate swirl and drama with their people. And I
Right.
think that we have to know how to have that discernment where we're being real, we're being authentic, but it's not over transparency or oversharing without boundaries, right? So I think it's the Stockdale paradox, gritty faith and gritty facts. Like gritty facts, we're dealing with the reality is hard, like this sucks, or we had to lay people off, or we're in a budget crisis, or whatever it is. So I'm not ignoring the elephant that's in the room.
Right.
And I also have faith we're going to get through this because we've been through tough stuff before. We've got a really good pipeline. We've got strong people. We've got strong plans. We have mitigation steps in place. Like it's talking about both, and why we have to talk about both as leaders is that in the absence of data, our brains will fill it in with story.
Absolutely. That's
you will
well
have a
said.
whole bunch of drama because if you're not being forthright, people are going to
And
make up
explicit.
their own story about what's happening. And now you're going to have
Yeah.
a really hard time navigating them through that adaptive zone.
That's right. Being explicit is so important. And
Yep.
it doesn't happen enough in organizations. But the thing I really like about what you said, I liked everything you said, but the idea that we have this community of leaders that we can learn together and have each other's backs. And we can support each other to step out, to try new things, to take risks, and know that we have a community to come back and say, what do we learn from that? How could I have done that better? What do we have to do next? And we're supported by others. And I think that's the other thing is really, creating a sense of community, if you will, and within your team and within your organization. That again goes back to this is a safe place. This is a place where you can shine, where you can speak up, where you can express yourself, where you can contribute in a major way. And that's what we're talking about, is creating those kinds of environments. So who doesn't want to be involved in that kind of environment?
100%.
Right. So and that to me is, one of the greatest things. It's like I think I was watching, reading a Forbes article back in 2018 about what they're saying is still a major leadership crisis, even with everything we've invested in it. And one of the things they said is you can't control outcomes. That's one of the misunderstandings that people have, that, I could take this pumpkin seed and I can say, that's going to be a 15-pound pumpkin. No matter how much I'm going to say that, and I put it in the ground, I can't guarantee that. And that's what we do with our results. And what they said in the article, which I think, again, it's right, is all you could do is create an environment that increases the likelihood that that pumpkin will be a big pumpkin, right? That's all you can do. You can't control what's going to happen. And I think one of the things that we've gotten stuck on, that we're hopefully loosening it on, is that fixation. Now, outcomes are important. We want to measure it. We want to make sure we're moving and increasing that. But a lot of times it goes back to, similar to the inner game creates the outer game. The context creates the possibility for a different outcome, right? Not the other way. You can't force the other way around, right?
Yep. Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think that, if you look back in history, especially now, if you add incentives or bonus pay plans or anything, when we get hyper focused on outcomes, that's where we start having shortcuts, potentially ethical issues, because people are focused on how do I meet this, whether it's a sales target or whatever, to move on. I think about the Wells Fargo scandal, back in the day, Enron, the list goes on. And so I think that it is, if we are tending to supporting and nurturing the behaviors that will lead to, so even going back to immunity to change, when we create an immunity to change map, it's not what outcome, it's what behaviors do I need to get better at, right? Because outcome, you can't control it, but you can go, you know what, if I get better at this, or we act this way, or we do these steps, or these are the things we focus on, we increase the likelihood that these are the targets, or these are the outcomes we're going to achieve. And that's what we have to excuse me, pay attention to. And so I think, there are things we can do for how we show up together as a team. I think there's things we can do of how we check in with one another that make it safe to talk about where we're at, whether we're on target or off target, where things are going well or not. But can we have that open dialogue so that we can course correct if we need to?
Right. Well said. I mean, it comes down to, having those conversations with your team and orienting to getting help, to support to do that, right? That's what you offer, we offer to do that. So in wrapping up, I guess the question I would have is, any parting words you have that, that you haven't felt like you have been able to talk about around the subject matter today, or anything you want to add to message to senior leaders out there that may be struggling with some of these changes that you would like to share, and as we part today?
Yeah, I think, it can feel overwhelming. And I would say start picking simple things that feel like they're not a big deal, but they are a big deal. And here's what I mean by that is that when I go back to, I like to blend, various stuff together. And so I'm part of the Consultant and Practitioner Alliance with the Table Group and Pat Lencioni. And what I love about going back to outer game stuff, most of Pat Lencioni's tools are outer game stuff, and they're great, simple, get results fast. And that's why it speaks to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And again, if it's not layered on an inner game, it doesn't work really well. So he talks about meeting cadences and are we focusing on the right thing in meetings and whatnot. And I take that and I take some tools from Brene Brown. And here's what we've started doing this past year. And it's actually made a big difference with our team is we have check-ins, and we first check in as a human being. So you could use the conscious leadership, am I above the line or below the line? But we've started saying, what's your 2-word check-in? How are you feeling today? And you might have someone says, I'm completely exhausted, or hopeful and encouraged, or catching up, or, so you can get a whole variety of things, but you check in first as a human being before you dive in to agenda items. And I don't care if this is a 15-minute huddle or an hour long, longer meeting, but check in first as a human, because if you find out and someone says barely breathing, we've got something to tend to. We need to tend to the human before we get to task. And I don't think we do that. We jump into here's an agenda versus can we check in as a human? So that would be my first thing, is start adding in some kind of authentic human check-in before your agendas. And then the second thing I would say, going back to people want to feel appreciated, but also normalizing the messiness of our world. Whether you do this in a meeting format, whether you use Slack or a Teams chat or something, but we've started doing an end of week reflection. And we do a check-in of let's look back at this week. What are our highlights? What went well, or what are we excited about? So we're kind of, we're celebrating each other. And even if it was a week was hard, well, this thing went better than I thought. But we also, I took a cue from Amy Edmondson, that she posted this months ago on LinkedIn, and I loved it. And we've used it ever since, F up Fridays. And we're what is our biggest F up? Detour, squiggle, misstep from the week. So we're normalizing talking about, and everyone has to share one. And here's the key. What did we learn from it? What's the valuable learning it brought us, so that you don't have dangerous silence? It fosters, and as the leader, you go first. So I'm here's my F up. This is what I did this week. You know what?
It. Right.
I overworked and didn't have a boundary and skipped my workout, or you know what? I forgot to get back to that client, and they're oh, got it. And here's my lesson learned and what I'm going to try to do. And so these are simple things, but they're tangible, and it starts to bring the humanness and open up communication. So if you do you should do a lot of other things, but if you do nothing else,
of course.
But if you do nothing else, just start to look at, those are just small examples, but what are other small ways you can start to just bring in more humanness and test the waters with just being vulnerable? And as a leader, you got to go first.
Well, anytime I've ever asked anybody to start doing those things, they're always amazingly surprised and relieved. A lot of times they're nervous about it at first. They do it, then they say, okay, what else can I do? And it really is about, yes, you have to make sometimes big changes. You have to, assess and design and all that stuff. But there's small things that you can do incrementally, and you can continue to build upon that can lead to then the willingness to step into the bigger changes you have to make. So
yeah, it's those small things that build capacity and tolerance and trust while the bigger stuff that takes longer and is messier to deal with, but it's like, oh, I know that we've got each other's back. I know that we can be real. I know that my leader has my back. I know that my leader cares about me. And I think, yeah, sometimes we get so focused on the big stuff, we forget about the small, in the moment, tangible things that can make such a big difference and help people feel seen. Because we all want to feel seen and heard and feel like we matter. And when someone takes just a few minutes to do that, it's a gift, because it's so lacking in our society right now.
Well, yeah, the best people leaders I work with always find the time and always are attentive to what you said. Like if they get in a call with a direct report and they notice their energy is low or whatever, that's what they're checking in on. Forget about the agenda. What's going on with you?
Yep.
And, you know, it's a huge impact. Those people will go to, you know, they'll do anything for that leader, and in many cases, you know. So it's an important point comment. Well, I want to, you know, we could continue to talk for hours like we usually do, but we'll have to limit this one. But I want to, you know, thank you for coming today, and I'll make sure that, you know, Salveo Partners website is down in the comments for the podcast. And I highly encourage everybody to run out and get your book, Re-humanizing in the Workplace, on Amazon and other large bookstores. It's available. Anything else that you want to share? And you had also talked about an immunity change or a link that you wanted to provide. If you provide that to me, I'll make sure.
Oh yeah, I'll get you. It's a blog post that I wrote that just kind of talks about that chocolate peanut butter. But yeah, I would just say, I would say, you know, here's the thing: is that when it comes to our human conscious leadership journey, and there isn't a one size fits all, and I think that you know, just like we have a bunch of different tools and programs and resources we lean on, and the reason why we have so many different, like, I know I have a bunch of certifications, but the reason I have so many tools, if you will, in my toolbox is because, you know, sometimes this combination is going to be a fit here, or this combination is going to be a fit there. And so I think, you know, we've got to be open to, if something doesn't feel right, like if a coach doesn't feel right or a therapist doesn't feel right, like you can change, right? Or if this consultant doesn't feel right or this program doesn't feel right. And I've worked with so many people that just feel like, oh, I need to stick this out. And I'm like, okay, it's one thing if your armor is getting the best of you and you're trying to tap out because you don't want to go into the messy middle, but that's different than, no, there's just something doesn't feel safe or doesn't feel right for me to enter in.
Right.
Listen to that voice a little bit. And I just think as you're looking for what's right for your team and organization, you know, like you would with anything else, shop around, you know, educate yourself on what's a fit, not what the latest fad is, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. Well, great. Well, thank you again, Rosie. I appreciate you coming today. It was a great conversation. We'll continue this over time, and maybe we'll have you back one day and continue the conversation here.
Oh, it was so much fun, David. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome, Rosie. Take care of yourself.